Good evening. Welcome to the second virtual public meeting for the Maryland 210 Pedestrian and Bicycle Study. Thank you for being here. My name is Jessica Pilarski, and I am with MDOT State Highway Administration's Public Involvement Section. I will serve as the meeting facilitator, and my role will be to help the meeting run as smoothly as possible. Let's start off with several housekeeping items. The meeting tonight is being recorded and will be made available on the Maryland 210 Pedestrian and Bicycle Study portal page, which is located on the MDOT SHA website. I'd like to point out that live captions and subtitles are available in both English and Spanish. The current slides show you how to find these options at the bottom right of your screen. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to update you on the completion of the Maryland 210 Pedestrian and Bicycle Study since our virtual public meeting last year, and to talk about the design for the first phase of improvements. Let's quickly go over the agenda. We'll have brief opening remarks and introductions, and then we'll have a PowerPoint presentation from the study team. We'll then have some housekeeping tips on using this virtual format for the Q&A, and we expect the presentations to last about 20 minutes or so. The rest of the meeting will be set aside for written questions that you can submit during the meeting, as well as questions we have already received. We have a number of study team members who we will call upon to respond. We'll talk more about that process in a moment. We do ask everyone who has joined the meeting via telephone to mute yourself in order to limit background noise, which can be distracting. Staff will try to monitor and help with that, but we ask that you please be aware of this and keep yourself muted if you're calling in tonight. I'd now like to introduce the MDOT SHA study team members we have with us this evening that you will hear during the presentation and/or Q&A. Scott Pimento, MDOT SHA Director, Office of Planning and Preliminary Engineering. Derek Gunn, Acting District Engineer, District 3. Eric Holmberg, Project Manager. Judith DeVasti, Title VI Manager. Terry Maxwell, Public Involvement Coordinator. And we also have some other study team members that will be here in case we need them during the Q&A. They'll serve as our panel members this evening. We have Bob Maimoni, OPPE Environmental Manager. Barry Kudrowski, OPPE Chief, Project Management Division. Peter Campanides, District 3, Assistant District Engineer for Traffic. And Holly Pearl, our Community Relations Manager. Now, Holly is having some issues with her video this evening, but Holly, if you'd like to say hello and let everybody know you're here.
Hi, good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
Great, thanks, Holly. Okay, I'd now like to turn it over to Scott Pimento for some welcoming remarks. Scott?
Hi, Scott, you're on mute.
Start over again. Good evening. I am Scott Pimento, Planning Director for the Maryland State Highway Administration. I want to thank and welcome you for attending tonight's meeting. We're here today to present some of the improvements that our team has identified to accommodate pedestrians and bicyclists along the 6-mile corridor of Maryland 210 between the Capitol Beltway and the southern intersection of Old Fort Road. The project goal is to develop short and long-term plans so that as roadway improvements occur in the future, we have a good idea how pedestrians and bicyclists will be safely accommodated along this corridor. We want to thank Prince George's County and the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission for their coordination as we move the first phase of improvements from planning to design. Our purpose tonight is to share with you the study results, answer your questions, and hear your suggestions and concerns. We view these meetings as an opportunity to hear from you. We know that good local input helps develop better projects that benefit all stakeholders. Thank you for being here. I'd now like to turn it over to Derek Gunn, Acting District Engineer for District 3. Derek?
Thank you, Scott. And good evening again. And thank you for joining us this evening for the Maryland 210 Pedestrian and Bicycle Study discussion. We appreciate your time and your interest in this important project. We look forward to a great conversation tonight. My name is Derek Gunn. I am the Acting District Engineer for the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration, District 3 office. As a brief overview, District 3 oversees the state-owned or numbered roadways in Prince George's and Montgomery counties. In addition to our MDOT SHA project team, who you will be hearing from shortly, with us this evening from the District 3 team is Peter Campanides, our Assistant District 3 Engineer of Traffic for Prince George's County. Peter has worked very closely with the Maryland 210 Traffic Safety Committee for over 5 years on a wide spectrum of safety improvements throughout the Maryland 210 corridor. MDOT SHA recently completed construction on the $130 million Maryland 210 at Kirby Hill and Livingston Road interchange project. While this seminal project's completion moves us closer to our shared goal of accessibility for all who use the roadway, we understand our work together with community members and stakeholders is not complete. Tragically, 6,516 pedestrians were killed in 2020 in the United States. And very recently, there were 2 pedestrian fatalities along Maryland 210, including a work zone fatality. One life lost is one too many. Safety for all users of our roadway is our priority, and particularly our most vulnerable users, including pedestrians and bicyclists. We would like to also thank for their continued support and recognize at this time our elected officials who have joined us this evening. Throughout tonight's meeting, we would like to provide each an opportunity to share remarks and to address the project in the Q&A box. We will share your remarks or questions immediately. At this time, I would turn the meeting over to Eric Holmberg, our project manager for the MDOT SHA Maryland 210 project.
Great, thank you, Derek. During tonight's presentation, I will be going over several aspects of this study, including the study background, a review of the planning study recommendations and the analyses that we conducted to reach those recommendations. I will describe the proposed phasing strategies to move the various improvements into design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction. Provide an in-depth look at the first phase of improvements and discuss the upcoming project schedule and the next steps. First, I'd like to talk about this project study area. This includes the 6-mile stretch of the Maryland 210 corridor from the Capitol Beltway to the southern intersection with Old Fort Road. The study area also includes the local road network that runs parallel to Maryland 210. Now on to a brief overview of the study. Planning efforts began in summer of 2021 with the purpose of identifying ways to provide safe and comfortable accommodations for pedestrians and bicyclists in the study area. The study's goals and objectives were to locate the existing pedestrian and bicyclist facilities within the study area and identify gaps that needed to be filled. We'd also wanted to find where people were traveling by foot or by bicycle, so we conducted an origins and destination study. We identified a preferred alignment for a pedestrian and bicycle facility and other necessary improvements throughout the study area. Finally, we developed a phasing strategy to help us decide which improvements should advance into preliminary design first. During the planning effort, the project team performed a preliminary desktop and environmental inventory and identified a handful of environmental resources in the area. These resources included wetlands, parks, streams, and 100-year floodplains. These resources will be further analyzed and any impacts will be quantified during the preliminary design phase. Now on to the findings. After analyzing all the available data, the study team identified 13 primary improvement locations and types. Improvements included upgrades to the existing facilities, as well as providing new facilities on both state-owned and local roadways. Specifically, these improvement types included a shared use path that would run parallel to Maryland 210, but would be physically separated from the vehicle lanes by curbs, barriers, or open space. We also examined sidewalks, crosswalks, bicycle lanes where appropriate, and shared bicycle and vehicle lanes, also known as SHAs, that would only be present on local roads, but not on Maryland 210. Over the next several slides, I will discuss the specific improvements at various locations. The first phase of improvements includes the area near Oxon Hill High School, down to and including portions of Kirby Hill Road. Improvements in this phase include construction of a new shared use path along the northbound side of Maryland 210 from the recently constructed interchange at Kirby Hill Road up to South Lawn Park. SHAs would then be marked along Carson Avenue and other local roads from the park to connect to the existing bicycle lanes on Clipper Way. The segment of Kirby Hill Road from the interchange with Maryland 210 to Oxon Hill Road would be restriped to provide a dedicated bicycle lane traveling westbound and a SHA in the eastbound lane. A crosswalk would also be added at the Kirby Hill Road interchange. These Phase 1 improvements will be described in greater detail later in the presentation. The second phase of improvements occurs at the north end and near the middle of the corridor. Improvements in this phase would include restriping the Bald Eagle Road Bridge over I-95, I-495 to provide dedicated bicycle lanes. We'd also looked at upgrading the existing sidewalk along Oxon Hill Road from the I-295 northbound bridge to Clipper Way. Finally, we would construct a shared use path on Oxon Hill Road from the Henson Creek Trail to Livingston Road. The third phase of improvements occurs between Kirby Hill Road and the northern intersection with Old Fort Road. Improvements in this area include construction of a shared use path along various stretches of Maryland 210, beginning on the northbound side, then crossing Maryland 210 at the Palmer Road-Livingston Road intersection and continuing on the southbound side. We would upgrade the existing service road from Alcoa Drive to the southern terminus to accommodate pedestrians and bicycles. We would also look at upgrading the crosswalk at Palmer Road and the Livingston Road intersection. The fourth phase of improvements includes the section of Maryland 210 from Old Fort Road to Swan Creek Road. Improvements in this area include construction of a shared use path along the southbound side of Maryland 210, construction of new sidewalks on the service roads, restriping portions of the service roads with SHAs, and installation of new crosswalks at the intersections with Fort Washington Road and Swan Creek Road. The fifth and final phase of improvements runs from Swan Creek Road to Old Fort Road and includes constructing a shared use path along the southbound side of Maryland 210. We also propose adding a sidewalk connection from East Tantalon Drive to the shared use path. Finally, we would look at an upgraded crosswalk at Old Fort Road. Now I would like to go into a little more detail on the first phase of improvements. As I mentioned earlier, this first phase has been funded for preliminary design and is in the process of moving forward. The first improvement from this phase is to connect the existing bike lanes on Clipper Way to South Lawn Park. This will be done by signing and restriping local roads between Carson Avenue and Clipper Way to provide a SHA. A SHA entitles cyclists to use the full width of the travel lane, and motorists should be prepared to share the roadway. A shared use path would also be constructed along the edge of South Lawn Park from Carson Avenue to connect to the next improvement in this phase. The next improvement is a barrier-separated shared use path along the northbound side of Maryland 210. This path would extend from South Lawn Park down to Kirby Hill Road and would be located behind the existing noise wall. By locating the path behind the noise wall, potential collisions with vehicles and pedestrians or cyclists would be eliminated. The final improvements of this phase includes a crosswalk at the Kirby Hill Road interchange and restriped facilities along Kirby Hill Road from Maryland 210 to Oxon Hill Road. On the westbound side of Kirby Hill Road, a dedicated bike lane would be added, while the eastbound lane would be restriped to include a SHA. These facilities would provide a connection to the existing bike lanes on Oxon Hill Road, which also connect to the Wilson Bridge Trail and other facilities in the area. Jumping into the project schedule, the preliminary planning portion of this effort has been completed, and MDOT SHA has initiated design efforts for the first phase of improvements. The study team anticipates reaching preliminary design for these improvements in the spring of 2024. The final design, right-of-way, and construction portions are not currently funded. However, coordination is underway to identify funding sources to keep the project moving. Phases 2 through 5 are not currently funded for any post-planning work. These phases may progress into design as funding becomes available, or they may be incorporated into other projects in the area. The study team has had an open line of communication with Prince George's County Department of Public Works and Transportation, as well as the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. Last November, MDOT SHA hosted a virtual public meeting to provide preliminary updates on the planning study and to seek feedback from the public. As we move forward, the study team would be happy to meet with community groups or individuals to further discuss the project. At this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to Judith DeVasti to review Title VI requirements.
Thank you. My name is Judith DeVasti. I serve as the Title VI Manager for MDOT SHA. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 provides that no person shall, on the grounds of race, color, national origin, sex, English proficiency, or disability, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity. Title VI gives the public the assurance that agency services and resources will be allocated fairly and any negative transportation impacts shared equally. Title VI provides opportunities for public participation in decision-making without regard to race, color, or national origin, including populations with limited English. If you feel that MDOT SHA is not meeting the expectations of Title VI and would like to either file a complaint or seek assistance, please contact me by phone at 410-545-0404 or by email at shatitlevi@mdot.maryland.gov. We encourage you to complete our demographic survey that's located on our project portal page. The survey is located under the title, Tell Us About Yourself. This information is required for many federal programs and is critical in making policy decisions, particularly for civil rights. We collect this information to increase access to transportation planning activities. I'll now pass the presentation back to Jessica.
Thank you, Judith. Before we move into the Q&A, I'd now like to ask Terry Maxwell from Public Involvement to review how to submit questions this evening. Terry?
Thanks, Jess, and thank you to our attendees for joining this evening online and on the phone. I'd like to cover a few quick tips on how you can participate tonight. As Jess noted, all participants will remain muted throughout the meeting to help with background noise. We will have several ways for you to provide input during and after the meeting. One way to do this is when we open for questions and comments, online users can use the Q&A box to type in your question or comment. To locate the Q&A, please look on the right side of your screen, likely towards the bottom, to locate a box where you can type a question. With many attendees tonight, the Q&A box will be helpful in tracking the comments and questions coming in and will help our moderator direct them to our panel of project team members. Users have the choice to post their question or comment anonymously by checking the provided box. You may also find some helpful information posted in the Q&A box, such as the project website and contact information. Next slide, please. Another way to provide input for those using the call-in option only and who do not have access to the Q&A box is to visit the online comment form on our project webpage after the meeting so we can make sure we receive your comments and concerns as well. To get to the online comment form, go to roads.maryland.gov, spelled out, and click on Projects to access the Maryland 10 Pedestrian and Bicycle Study Project, listed under District 3, Prince George's County, in MDOT SHA's project portal. We will share this comment form location information again throughout the meeting. So thank you, and at this point, I'll turn it back over to Jess.
Thank you very much, Terry. I would like to note to those attendees that are with us this evening that we do plan on ending the meeting on time tonight, but if we run out of questions or discussion topics, we may conclude earlier. Now let's move on to the community questions and comments. The team has heard some questions submitted online since the study was completed this fall. I'll start by summarizing some of those comments and questions first. In the meantime, we do encourage you to please submit your questions using the Q&A box. And I do see some of those coming in. Thank you so much. And I will read the questions for the panel of study team members to address. Okay, start with those pre-submitted comments. So several of the comments that we've received prior to this meeting relate to safety concerns and the need for separated facilities. One example of a separated facility that people referenced was on the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. Eric, I'd like to ask if you could respond to this comment for us, please.
Absolutely, Jessica. I definitely understand the concerns regarding pedestrian and bicyclist safety in the area, and this has been our primary objective throughout the study. As I showed in the presentation, we do not propose any facilities along Maryland 210 itself. Instead, we have focused the proposed improvements on independent facilities that would be separated from mainline Maryland 210.
Thanks for that, Eric. Okay, another pre-submitted comment we heard was to please create pedestrian bridges. Eric, I'm going to turn this one over to you as well, if that's okay.
Definitely. So as far as pedestrian bridges go, at this time, our focus has really been on at grade or crosswalks at various intersections along the corridor. However, as the corridor continues to develop and as this project or as other roadway projects progress, pedestrian bridges could definitely be looked at again.
Okay, thank you. Another comment that was submitted previously was encouraging the funds for this project to go towards expanding parking, signage, and entryways to the Henson Creek Trail. Entryways and trails to and from popular areas and housing developments would be ideal. This trail is already made, already being improved, and makes one feel more in nature and far safer. The commenter guesses that it would be less expensive, especially considering the high pedestrian fatality rate on 210. Eric, can I ask you to respond to this one as well?
Yes. So while this study does not include direct improvements to the Henson Creek Trail or to its parking, many of the proposed improvements do include connections to other trails, including the Henson Creek Trail. Specifically, we recommended a connection be made between our proposed shared use path and the Henson Creek Trail near the Palmer Road Livingston Road intersection. We have also proposed a shared use path along Oxon Hill Road from where it crosses Henson Creek Trail near Fort Foote Road, and that our shared use path would run from about Fort Foote Road down to Livingston Road. So while we don't have those direct improvements to the Henson Creek Trail, we do have, we're creating more of a network that connects to those trails.
Thank you, Eric. And the last pre-submitted comment suggests the need for police officers dedicated to patrolling Maryland 210 instead of a speed camera. Peter Campanitas, I'd like to turn this one over to you, please.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm Peter Campanitas, Assistant District Engineer for Traffic. Along 210, primarily south of Old Fort Road North, there are 3 speed cameras that are deployed, which are controlled by Prince George's County Police. In addition to that, police enforcement has been performed, and actually along 210, there are 2 police districts that handle enforcement. The area from Old Fort Road North, northward to the DC line, residents can contact the Oxon Hill Division 4 station at 301-749-4900, and any location south of Old Fort Road North, southward toward the Prince George's County line, can contact the Fort Washington Division 7 station at 301-292-5300, and I can provide that in the Q&A chat as well for anyone who missed those numbers.
Thank you, Peter. That would be very helpful. Okay, that covers our pre-submitted comments online at this point. So I am going to move over to the Q&A. I see several comments coming in. Please, I encourage attendees to go ahead and submit your questions and comments using the Q&A. And we'll go ahead and start with the first one I see. It says, apologies, I must have misheard. Are you considering putting a SHA on the actual Maryland 210, or is it along Maryland 210 on the service road? Who on the team could answer that one for us?
I can clear that one up. We are not proposing a SHA on Maryland 210. It would be along the service roads in certain areas where adding a path or providing other upgrades might not fit within the footprint or within the available space. But yes, it would be on the service road and not on Maryland 210.
Thanks for clarifying that, Eric. Okay, and what gives MDOT SHA assurance that 100% of motorists will follow the rules of vehicle operation in SHAs? That's a tough one. Can someone take a crack at that one?
Yes, I will. Yes, it is a tough one because that's a situation that we have in many locations in Prince George's County, and a lot of it has to do with ensuring that the proper signing and payment markings are in place from an engineering perspective, as well as education about the rules of the road and how bicyclists who are traveling on the road would be considered a motor vehicle in a manner of speaking and should be following the rules of the road, and also enforcement to make sure that bicyclists know that they should be riding in the same direction of vehicular traffic.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, the next question is asking, are there any plans to provide a barrier along 210 to protect cyclists? And if not, what is the mindset behind not providing a barrier on such a high-speed road? Eric, can I turn that one to you?
Yes. So I'm going to focus primarily on the first phase of improvements where we have the shared use path between Kirby Hill Road and South Lawn Park. Specifically in that area, there will be a barrier between cyclists or pedestrians and the vehicles. For those of you who are familiar, MDOT SHA has recently, in the last couple of years, constructed the noise barriers as part of the Kirby Hill project, and the shared use path would be behind those. So you would have the vehicle travel lanes, you would have the shoulder, you would have the edge of the road barrier, then you would have the noise wall, and then you would have the shared use path. In other areas, for instance, where we're have a shared use path or other facilities along one of the service roads, those service roads are offset fairly far from Maryland 210. So a barrier may not be appropriate in those locations, but in areas otherwise, yes, we are looking at barriers or fairly significant offsets to prevent the opportunity for those collisions to occur.
Great, thank you, Eric. Okay, next question. At the intersection of Palmer Road and 210, part of the Henson Trail goes under 210. Was part of the study done to use that part of the Henson Trail due to high traffic and crash rates at that intersection?
So I really like this question, and I think it's going to be very, very helpful moving forward, actually. So because of how preliminary our concept development was in the planning study, we didn't get into the specifics of things like that. However, this is definitely something that I would like to take a look at as that phase moves into preliminary design. Since that underpass or tunnel is already there on the Henson Creek Trail, if things work out, it would make sense to use that and avoid a crosswalk, or give people an opportunity to avoid crossing at the intersection itself. So it's definitely something that we will look into as we progress into design.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, the next question is, are these slides available online? And the answer to that is yes, these will be available online. They're not there now, but they will be posted in the next several days. So please keep an eye out for updates to the portal page. I'm sure the team will be updating that page with more information following this meeting. Thank you. That was a great question.
Jessica, I'd also just like to tack onto that. We will also have our document that summarizes the findings and the recommendations from the study that'll also be on the project website, probably about the same time this recording goes up.
Perfect. Thanks, Eric. Okay, and Peter has included the phone number information that he was talking about earlier. So please see the Q&A box for any of those specific phone numbers that you're looking for. Okay, I think we're caught up with the Q&A at this point. I do want to talk about some questions that the team has heard throughout the study that I think would be helpful for our attendees, just to kind of cover some of the general topics that we've heard. So first of all, we do hear sometimes that people don't see a lot of bikes using Maryland 210. And they ask, why we're spending the time and the money looking at bicycle facilities when we have so much to do to reduce vehicle congestion. And Eric, could you elaborate on that one a little bit and respond to that comment?
Yeah, so I have just a couple of, it's a multi-part answer here, but I'd like to start out by noting that this bike and pedestrian study, we're not conducting this in lieu of highway improvements. Rather, we're conducting it as a sort of parallel effort with the roadway improvements. As we've mentioned several times throughout the presentation, and as I'm sure everybody is aware, MDOT SHA has recently completed the Kirby Hill Road interchange project at the northern end of the study area. We are also in the early phases of planning and design activities for the next segment of Maryland 210, which includes the intersections of Palmer Road and Livingston Road, as well as the northern intersection with Old Fort Road. So this bike and ped study is going to be implemented in multiple ways. This first phase is looking like it may be constructed as a standalone project when we get to that point. Other phases may be, kind of rolled into these larger construction projects, or they may serve as, kind of a roadmap sort of for those larger roadway improvements, so that as the designers get underway with highway improvements or interchanges or whatever comes next, we've provided them the recommendations on how bicyclists and pedestrians should be accommodated in this area, so that it can be a multimodal project of sorts.
Thank you, Eric. Now, you may have addressed this one in your recent response, Eric, but we do need to go back to the question about barriers on Maryland 210. And the commenter here is just not sure that that was fully addressed. So the statement was made that there will be no barriers along 210. If that is true, why are we not providing barriers on such a high speed road? And they're talking specifically about along Maryland 210. Is there anything more that you have to add, or do any other team members want to chime in on that one? Barrier that separates cyclists and drivers, they're clarifying.
So we did not look at improvements on mainline Maryland 210. So if you're talking about potentially putting like barrier separated bicycle lanes on Maryland 210, that's not something we looked at. We focused on a parallel facility that would be behind the noise barriers, could be behind guardrails as needed. It depends on the location. It depends on how close the shared use path would be to Maryland 210. And a lot of those details we don't necessarily have yet because we're at such a preliminary stage of design.
Thanks, Eric. It sounds like we could get more into the details of those types of questions as the study progresses. Okay, so back to some reoccurring themes and some questions that we've heard, frequently asked questions throughout the study. We do hear the question, have you considered lowering the speed limit to reduce fatal crashes? And I'd like to turn to Peter to answer that question for us.
Yes, and we've heard that as well. We in the district office, as I'm sure many of you are aware, much of Maryland 210 from south of Palmer Road to the Prince George's County line is posted for 55 miles per hour. Many of those motorists are driving at speeds that they feel most comfortable driving, which equates to much faster than 55 miles per hour. And what we're trying to do at this point, particularly on the 4-lane divided section, and that's the section between Maryland 228 and the Charles County line, is we're considering applying some treatments to see if we can get motorists to drive closer to the posted speed limit. And we're going to be studying that very closely over the course of the next few months. And as far as other locations, the Maryland 210 Kirby Hill Road project has been completed, and we're going to be looking at speeds along that section very closely also. And it's really an ongoing process because right now we're in a transition phase, for lack of a better phrase, from a roadway that has traffic signals to a roadway that doesn't have traffic signals. So we're trying to accommodate both things.
Thanks for that, Peter. Okay, it looks like we have a new, looks like a comment and a question in the Q&A. The commenter says, thank you for clarifying that MDOT SHA is committed to not put bicycles on the main Maryland 210 roadway. And they're asking, what is the volume of traffic on the parallel road where the sharers will be placed? Can we answer that question?
I don't think I can give any specific numbers. So in the first phase, we are proposing the sharrows along Carson Avenue, which is a residential street signed at 25 miles per hour. I don't have the volume numbers for that. Based on the roadway characteristics, kind of the nature of the roadway, we expect that it is very low. As we move this into design, we can definitely look at getting those volumes to be a little bit more precise and make a final determination if that's truly an appropriate improvement in that area. For other areas such as the service roads, again, I don't have specific numbers for the volumes. Again, the service roads may be a little bit higher than the residential streets, but certainly much lower than Maryland 210. And again, as we progress into design, we'll have a little bit more of those specific and concrete numbers.
Great, thanks, Eric. Okay, it looks like we're caught up with the Q&A at this point. Want to encourage people to keep those comments and questions coming. If you're calling in this evening, you can comment on our online comment form or send Eric or Holly an email. We'd be happy to follow up with you. Let's go to some more of those frequently asked questions. So this next one, why is the first phase focused on just the northern section of the corridor? Eric, can you take that one?
I can. So during our planning efforts, as we started to kind of break these improvements down into smaller phases to move forward independently, the area that we saw with the highest number of pedestrians and bicyclists, or the highest potential for pedestrians and bicyclists, was at the northern end. A lot of that is it's a little bit more denser with residential. There is more commercial areas there around, like MGM and the mall, Oxon Hill High School, and then areas along Oxon Hill Road itself. Just kind of lended itself to having the highest volume of users. But as additional phases progress into design, they would also they would be further south, and they would then connect to those northern improvements and create a continuous connection throughout the corridor.
Thanks, Eric. I do want to note that maybe one of our phone callers this evening submitted a comment on the online comment form. Thank you for that. It says MDOT SHA and the county worked together to put signage on Potomac Heritage National Scenic Trail on-road bike route. Please do all you can to improve this route. So I just want that commenter to know that that comment has been received and noted. And let's go back to our Q&A. All right. This next one says, to be clear, the work you are doing is awesome. It just seems dangerous to put a bike lane on a highway where it has been documented that speeds are already high and not look at protecting cyclists. The reality is not many are gutsy enough to ride there anyway, but it is dangerous without a barrier. This seems more of a comment than a question. Eric, anything to add there?
I think that the only thing that I can really add to that is that because of the high speeds, that's why we're trying to move cyclists off of 210 and provide them, an alternate facility on a shared use path that would run adjacent to 210.
Okay. And another comment in the Q&A says it would be important to have the numbers given that a 25 mile per hour zone bicycle could slow down to a 12 miles per hour if cars would follow the law and follow such bicycle. This creates conflict that we want MDOT SHA to be considerate about. Thank you for that comment. Okay, let's go back to some of our FAQs. I think we are caught up in the Q&A at this point. Thank you to our attendees that are submitting great questions and comments this evening. All right. The next question we heard is, will there be landscape enhancements to beautify the corridor? For this one, I'd like to ask Derek Gunn if he could chime in there.
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. What I would tell the folks on the call is that environmental stewardship, that's very important to SHA. It's a big part of what we do. We do have some different mechanisms that could help us with landscaping along the corridor outside of our normal maintenance activities. Through our landscape programs division out of our Office of Environmental Design, they advertise area-wide landscaping contracts. They have one that is going forward in Prince George's County and one in Montgomery County in District 3. And what those give us is an opportunity to look at different things that are a little bit non-traditional to what our maintenance folks would do. For example, mulching and hedging and things of that sort. So that could be a mechanism that we explore a little bit further to look at beautification along the corridor.
Thank you, Derek. Okay, another question came in the Q&A. It asks, would the path on the other side of the sound wall have lights? Who can answer that one for us?
This is something that we have actually chatted with Maryland National Park and Planning Commission, as well as Prince George's County, is providing lighting and also providing you know, those like the safety phones. And we don't have specifics on a lighting plan that, or, you know, where those telephones may or may not be placed. That's something that we'll get into, you know, as we progress through design. But yes, lighting and other safety aspects are definitely things that we are taking a very close look at as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Eric. All right, we are caught up in the Q&A. I'd like to keep this discussion going if we could. The next question that we've heard throughout the study is, are these improvements all along Maryland 210, or are some on local roads also? Eric, can you take that one? I know I'm keeping you busy tonight.
Oh, yeah, no problem. So yeah, we have taken a very holistic approach to this study area to not only connect the pedestrians and bicyclists from point A to point B along Maryland 210 via that separated parallel facility, but we also want to connect to the local communities, connect to, you know, existing trails in the area, such as the Henson Creek Trail, the Woodrow Wilson Bridge Trail, and, you know, just other dedicated or shared facilities in the area to, you know, create that full network so that you can really get, you know, you can get around and you can get from your house to the store, to the school, you know, and things like that, rather than, you know, just get from the bottom of the corridor to the top. And so that does improve the improvements along Maryland 210, but also throughout the local network.
Thank you, Eric. All right, the next question in the Q&A, I'm not sure if we can answer this one. I do want to raise it to the team. It says, what would it take to have a similar approach for MDOT SHA to remove bicycles from Maryland 214? Now that is kind of unrelated to this project, but I did want to just ask if we do have anybody that this commenter questioner could follow up with, or if we have any information on Maryland 214 that we could share.
I will try to provide an initial response to that. I don't know how much you know about Maryland 214, but outside of the Beltway, east of Maryland 202 Largo Road, there's a section of 214 that's being resurfaced, and we're looking to narrow the lanes along that section in order to get traffic to drive more gently along that section. and also make it a little bit more comfortable for bicyclists to be able to ride on the shoulders. There are quite a few sections that have shoulders that can accommodate bicyclists, and at the moment that area is also used for transit riders, and we're taking an opportunity with the road resurfacing to make it more comfortable for those users to be able to use Maryland 214.
Thanks for that, Peter. All right, I am seeing that we're caught up in the Q&A here. I would like to ask Bob Maimoni, our environmental manager, the next question. We have been asked, will these improvements harm the environment? And what about the additional noise? Bob, can you address that one for us?
Yeah, sure can. Thanks, Jess. Yeah, I mean, at this time, we're very early in this study process, so we haven't really identified specific project environmental impacts yet. However, as the study does progress and as the design gets developed, we will be doing a detailed impact assessment based on the actual design of the project. And that's all as part of the National Environmental Policy Act or the NEPA process. Based on the preliminary studies that we've done so far, we do anticipate that the overall environmental impacts of the project would be relatively minor, and expect that the compliance with NEPA will be achieved through the development of a categorical exclusion document. And that's a document that is developed to basically explain that the overall environmental impact of the project is not significant. And in terms of noise, noise will also be addressed as part of that same NEPA document and NEPA study. However, just want to point out that the proposed project is looking at the implementation of a bike path, which is obviously much different than a lot of the roadway improvements that we do at State Highway. And those types of facilities don't typically generate enough noise to noticeably alter the existing noise environment. But as I said, this will be evaluated in more detail later in the project development process and will be documented as part of the NEPA document. It should also be noted that there could be some temporary noise impacts related to construction activities. And that's during the construction of this facility. But MDOT SHA has and will employ best management practices to hopefully minimize the noise impacts during construction to the extent possible. And all of this, again, will be documented in our NEPA document.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, back to the Q&A. I see we have 2 new questions that have come in. The first one says, what are the plans to maintain the new bicycle pedestrian clean and obstruction-free? Debris on the highway is slow to be removed. Example, Old Fort Road and 210 has had several large pieces of debris littering the intersection for a few weeks. It is very challenging for 2-wheel bicycles to navigate. Can I ask the team to respond to this question, please?
Sure. This is Barry Kiedraowski. I can start off with that. Right now we are very early in the planning process, but as we get into preliminary design and work with our maintenance areas and our local jurisdictions, such as Prince George's County, we'll develop plans for how a path would be maintained. So those are plans that still have to be worked out in detail. Hope that answers that part of the question.
Thanks, Barry. And then the next question says, there is planned intersection renovations and middle lane easy pass. Not the right term, I know, correct? how will those plans impact timing on this work? So the planned intersection renovations, and how will those plans impact timing on this work? Are we able to address that at this time?
Barry, do you want to touch on the next couple of intersections we're looking at?
Sure. I will. Yeah, sure. I'll see if I can answer this in general, and then if there's any other clarifications, please let us know in the chat. Right now, what we are looking at is we are coordinating with. There's two different things we're coordinating with. One, we know that up towards the northern part of Maryland 210, along the 495, there is a project that we are partnering with the Virginia Department of Transportation on. It's the southeast side express lane study. So that is something that is separate from 210, if that's what's being referred to. So that does not have an impact on this area. The other thing that we are looking at is we do have roadway improvements for the 210 corridor that we've received preliminary design funding for. This is for a project at the Palmer, Livingston, and Old Fort North vicinity. So we will be looking at these intersections, and our current efforts will include developing alternatives and looking at the concepts that were previously developed for this area, and perform reevaluation activities. More information on those improvements will be available to the public in the coming months.
Thank you, Barry. And then as far as how those plans might impact the timing on this work, I'd just like to remind everybody that right now the only phase that we have moving into design is that first phase from about the Beltway down to Kirby Hill Road. So at least on Maryland 210, most of our construction activities have been wrapped up. So there should be very few impacts from these upcoming projects or studies that we have ongoing. However, as we move further down the corridor, like Barry mentioned, near the Palmer Road, Livingston Road intersection and the Old Fort Road intersection, as those progress into design, they may move faster than that phase of the bike and ped study. But since we do have our recommendations from the study, we can use those to help influence, designs at those locations to best incorporate bicycle and pedestrian facilities as part of them.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, I'm not seeing anything new in the Q&A. I do have some more frequently asked questions that we could keep going with to keep this discussion going a little bit longer. The next question is, how are you working with Prince George's County, and do they support this Maryland 210 pedestrian and bicycle study? Barry, can I lean on you for that one?
Sure. So MDOT SHA, we've been having ongoing coordination with staff at the Prince George's County Department of Public Works and Transportation, as well as staff at Maryland National Capital Park and Planning area. As Eric Holmberg mentioned earlier there, he referenced there was a question about lighting, and I guess that was a great example there of how we've been taking some of their comments and evaluating them, and they've been providing feedback on, of course, proposed improvements, but also they provided feedback initially on the different needs that need to be addressed throughout the vicinity. And yes, they are supporting this study and potential projects that will come out of it.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Barry. I apologize if you hear a little bit of background noise. There are some people here working in the office, and hopefully that you don't pick up on that. Okay, So I think we're still caught up with the Q&A. I would like to go over some more general questions we've heard. This next question is a very common question that people want to know, and I think it's important to cover. It's when will I find out, or when will I find out if my property is affected? And Eric, can you explain a little bit about that process?
Absolutely, and I definitely understand why this is, such a concern for so many people, because it really is a big deal. At this time, it's really too soon for the team to accurately determine what any potential right-of-way needs might be. However, as the preliminary design efforts get underway, we'll be obtaining some detailed topographic mapping, as well as utility locations, and all of that data can be used to really refine these early concepts we have, and give us a very good idea of exactly where they'll go, what kind of earthwork is going to be associated with it, what the needs for potential stormwater management or environmental mitigation might be. So really, as we approach that preliminary design milestone that I mentioned, that we're targeting for early 2024, around that time we should have a very good idea of exactly what the footprint from this project is going to be. So around that time, that's when we would plan to conduct an affected property owners meeting, where we would invite all of the property owners that might be impacted by the improvements. We'd have them come to a meeting where we can discuss the specific impacts to each person's property on an individual basis. We'd also be able to provide a little bit more detailed information on how the right-of-way process works and what the next steps in the process would be.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. And speaking of next steps, so as far as the study is concerned, what should people expect? What are the next steps, and how will they be informed?
So I'll touch on the next steps in the process, and then Holly or Jessica, you guys might want to touch on how best to stay informed.
Absolutely.
As I've noticed, we have just recently initiated that preliminary design effort. So we're very early in that process, and we're trying to get things going, and we're getting that mapping. We're starting the design work, and we're really getting it underway. But we do expect to reach that milestone in early 2024. And around that time, in addition to the affected properties owner meeting I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, we also do plan to do some sort of outreach at that time, just to provide the public an update on where things stand with the design.
Thank you, Eric. Holly, would you like to talk a little bit about how the team can hear from the public? How can they submit comments and stay up to date on the project?
Sure. Thanks, Jessica. We have a project portal on the website, and some of the comments tonight, I think, we received through that. We keep it updated on every stage of the project, so please check there. It's listed by district and county. You can also feel free to email myself. My email's on the screen, hpearl@mdot.maryland.gov, or Eric Holmberg, who's the project manager, and we will respond to you as quickly as we can.
Thanks so much, Holly. Okay, I'm not seeing anything new in the Q&A. I do have two more questions that I'd like to propose here to the team. And then if we see more questions and comments coming in the Q&A, we'll be sure to get to them. Okay, next question, I'm gonna throw this one to Barry, and it is the Maryland 210 project a part of the I-495 managed lanes project, or the VDOT, the Virginia DOT I-495 cell project? Barry, can you touch on this for us?
Sure, Jessica, there. Yeah, so as I did allude to this a little bit earlier as well, but this is a 210 project is separate from any of those other efforts going along I-495, whether it's the partnering that we're doing with the Virginia Department of Transportation or the other Maryland's managed lane study.
Thanks for that, Barry. Okay, and finally, this is another popular question that we hear all the time, and I think it's important to cover it again. I'm sure we've already covered it, but let's talk about it again. People always want to know, when can we see the start of construction? Eric, can you answer that for us as best as you can?
Sure, yeah, and I understand why this question comes up so much, because construction is kind of the exciting part of the process. But at this time, we are only funded for our preliminary design efforts. So we still need to secure funding for final design, any necessary right-of-way acquisition, and then finally, identify funding for construction. Hopefully we can kind of get those things wrapped up as we work through design and there aren't any delays. But once we get a little bit more into design and we have a better idea of really the scope and cost of these first phase of improvements, then we'll have a better idea of when we could potentially see this moving into construction.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, great questions and comments from our attendees tonight. Thank you to our team for your responses. I think I've covered most of the general questions that we've heard throughout the study, and we've gotten through our Q&A. At this point, I think we are ready to move to closing comments. And for that, I would like to turn it over to Scott Pimento for some closing remarks. Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. I just want to thank everybody for a great discussion and the good feedback. If you know someone that was unable to attend tonight's meeting, the recording will be available on the project website. And we'll be sure to notify the public when the preliminary design is completed. In the meantime, the project website is the best source for updates on the project. And I'd now like to ask Derek for a few closing remarks. Derek?
Thank you, Scott. And thank you again for joining us this evening. Hopefully the presentation given was found to be informative and our team was responsive to your questions received earlier and in the Q&A box. Your feedback means a great deal to us and it helps us guide our process as we move forward. We look forward to a continued partnership with the community and working together with all project stakeholders as this pedestrian and bicycle project moves forward. So thank you again.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you, Derek. I'd also like to thank our participants this evening, and we look forward to continue to work with you. And at this point, we will now conclude tonight's meeting, and I hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you so much.